For 3 years, every morning began the same way for Clara, with fear sitting on her chest heavier than the cold farmhouse air. The bruises were easy to hide beneath long sleeves and silence, but the shame was harder to bury. She had married young, believing love meant endurance, believing that if she stayed quiet and tried harder, the rage in her husband would someday soften. It never did. The first slap came after a spilled cup of coffee, followed by apologies and promises, then fists, then words sharp enough to scar deeper than skin. The isolation was complete, no phone calls allowed, no neighbors welcomed, no friends left. The farmhouse stood miles from the nearest town, surrounded by dry fields and broken fences, a prison disguised as a home. Each night Clara lay awake listening to the wind rattle the windows, wondering how a person could disappear while still breathing. The man she lived with had learned how to break her without leaving marks that would draw questions. He controlled food, money, and hope with the same cruel precision. When she cried, he mocked her. When she went silent, he punished her for that too. 3 years taught her how to move carefully, how to anticipate moods, how to become small enough to survive. She stopped dreaming, stopped praying, stopped believing escape was possible. Then one afternoon, during a storm so loud it drowned out her thoughts, there was a knock at the door. Not the angry slam she knew so well, but a steady, firm knock, calm, patient, unfamiliar. Her husband wasn't home. Fear and curiosity battled inside her as she opened the door just a crack. A tall cowboy stood there, rain dripping from the brim of his hat, eyes steady and kind. He said he was looking for a ranch owner about a broken cattle fence down the road. Clara tried to answer, but her voice failed her. The cowboy noticed the tremor in her hands, the fading bruise along her jaw she'd forgotten to cover. He didn't ask questions, he didn't stare, he simply said, "You don't look safe," like it was a fact, not an accusation. Something inside her cracked, not loudly, not all at once, but enough to let a breath of air in. She shook her head, trying to close the door, trying to protect him and herself from consequences she knew too well. But the storm worsened, thunder rolling like a warning, and he gently asked if he could wait inside until it passed. Clara hesitated, knowing what would happen if her husband returned and found another man there. Still, for the first time in 3 years, someone stood before her who did not demand fear in exchange for survival. She stepped aside, the door closed behind him, and with it, the world Clara knew began to shift, though she didn't yet understand how dangerous hope could be, or how powerful. And if this story has already touched something inside you, stay with us and consider subscribing, because what happens next is where everything changes. The cowboy introduced himself simply, like a man who didn't need titles to feel whole, and as the storm raged outside, silence filled the room in a way that felt different, not threatening, not sharp. He noticed the house first, the broken chair, the cracked mirror, the way Clara flinched at every sound. He offered to fix the fence himself if she could point him in the right direction, but when she tried to speak, tears finally came quiet at first, then unstoppable. 3 years poured out in broken sentences and shaking breaths. She expected disbelief, maybe pity, maybe silence. Instead, she saw anger settle in his jaw, not wild rage, but the kind born from injustice. He told her she didn't deserve any of it. The words landed awkwardly, like a language she had forgotten how to understand. When the sound of a truck echoed down the road, Clara panicked, begging him to leave before it was too late. The cowboy didn't argue. He didn't act like a hero. He simply said, "You don't have to stay," and slipped a folded paper into her hand with an address and a promise of help. Then he walked back into the storm. That night was the worst beating she had ever endured, punishment fueled by suspicion and cruelty, but something inside Clara refused to break again. The next morning, when her husband left, she packed nothing but her resolve and walked out the door barefoot, bruised and terrified. Every step toward the road felt like betrayal of fear itself. She found the address on the paper. an old ranch owned by people who believed in second chances. The cowboy was there, so were others who listened, who helped, who protected without demanding payment in silence or pain. The legal process was slow, healing was slower, nightmares lingered, trust came in fragments, but Clara learned to stand upright again. She learned that strength didn't mean enduring abuse, it meant choosing life. Months later, standing under an open sky, she realized the sound of the wind no longer scared her. It reminded her of the day a stranger knocked on a door and changed everything by doing the simplest, bravest thing, seeing her as human. Her story didn't end with rescue. It began with choice. And today, if you're watching this and feel trapped in your own silence, remember this. One moment, one decision, one unexpected knock can rewrite everything. Subscribe to this channel for more powerful stories of survival, courage, and transformation, because stories like Clara's are proof that even after years of darkness, hope can still walk through the door.